I'm here today with Hayley Simmonds, the current British time trial champion and 10-mile competition record holder. It's early in an Olympic season and Hayley's training hard to prepare for, hopefully, to take part in the Rio Olympics. And we're talking today about her background in the sport, her training, her nutrition, working with her coach. So Hayley, what is your background in cycling?
So when I was at school and then when I started at Cambridge, I was a rower. And when I knew that I'd kind of got a place at Cambridge, my big goal was to row in the boat race. I couldn't actually take part in university level rowing until my third year of my undergrad, just because they do a lot of training on Saturdays and I had Saturday lectures in my first and second year. So started rowing with the University Women's Boat Club in my third year and competed in the boat race in 2009. But the following year was my finals, and basically I'd spent a lot of the 2008-2009 year falling asleep in lectures or being quite tired after getting up at 5 a.m. to go to Ely to train. So I basically stopped doing any kind of sport. While I'd been rowing, my other half suggested that actually cycling possibly might suit me better than rowing anyway, just because I'm a little bit short for rowing. And so when I started looking for some kind of exercise to do again after I finished my finals, he said, well, why don't you use one of my old racing bikes and buy a pair of shoes and some cheap kit and just give it a go. And yeah, it all kind of took off from there, I suppose. And he'd actually been supported by the CTT scholarship program to go to Belgium and race in the summer of 2007. Right. So he'd cycled competitively since the age of 13, I think, and his dad had cycled as well before that. So
the cycling family route. Yeah.
Yeah. So he took me out on some rides on the Cambridgeshire countryside and started doing some local evening 10s. I think probably the first 10 I did was some point in 2011, and they went okay, but I wasn't as fast as I wanted to be. I didn't want to be coming, kind of 15th, 16th, 17th. I wanted to be top 10 or even better, so kind of looked to start training properly and improving. So naturally Mark suggested sessions that I could do to help me improve, and then he became my coach, and it all went from there.
Great partnership. So he's got a background in the sport. Is he a trained coach?
No, he's not. I mean, he's been racing since he was a teenager, and road racing and time trialing, though actually predominantly road racing. But he loves cycling, and he reads so much, and he's got a very scientific background. He's got a PhD in theoretical chemistry from Cambridge, so he likes reading the new research on training, and he loves kind of working out equipment and the aerodynamics of all of my equipment, things like that. So he just takes a real interest in anything to do with the sport. And so, when I first got into it, I didn't really think about paying a coach, because I didn't realise that perhaps I could get to the level that I've got to. So he just suggested training sessions I could do, and then as I started getting better and better, it didn't seem to make sense to change at all, because what I was doing was working. And I think a lot of people wouldn't be very happy with being coached by the person they live with. They find it quite difficult, and I speak to people about it and they say, I don't know how you do it, but it works for us.
Yes.
And Mark is always on hand, any time of day or night if I need something, or if I'm doing a session and maybe I'm a bit tired and I need to change it, then I can literally walk into the room next door and say, this isn't going very well, I think I need to change the session a little bit, and we can adapt straight away. So it works really well.
So you're basically his guinea pig, and you turned out to be a very good one.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I was. I don't think he necessarily intended to get into coaching. It just happened that he was setting me training plans right from, the autumn of 2011 was when I first started following a set training plan. So after I finished a 1-year MPhil in October 2011, I went to South America for 5 weeks with my dad actually, and then came back start of November and thought what I really want to do is do the Oxford-Cambridge cycling varsity match, which is a 25-mile time trial. So I thought, well, I want to do that. I want to come in the top 3 from Cambridge to get my half blue. Blues are a very Oxford-Cambridge thing, but rowing in the boat race, because I was in the reserve boat, I got university colours, and what I really wanted was a full blue or a half blue. So I thought, well, okay, I'll try and get a half blue in cycling. So said to Mark, I want to train for a 25-mile time trial. So he started setting me sessions to improve my hour power, my hour-long time trialing ability. And then the week before the varsity match, which is actually also the university 25-mile championship, is the 10-mile championship. So I did the 10-mile first and ended up coming second, which I was amazed by, because the girl who won was Kira Horn, who's now obviously on the British Team Pursuit squad. Yeah. And the person who was third was Claire Galloway, who for a while was on the British Team Pursuit programme as well. So I was, I knew I was going well, but I didn't realise that I'd managed to improve quite so much as to put me in the mix with such good riders. So I had a lot of confidence going into the 25 the week after, where again I was second to Kira, which meant that I kind of technically won the varsity match because I was the first rider from Oxford or Cambridge. Yeah, and because of that actually meant that I was in line to meet the criteria for a full blue. And one of the other criteria for the full blue was to come in the top 20% in one of the CTT national time trials. So from that I thought, well, I'll enter the national 10 or the national 25, and I finished 8th in the national 10, which was just about in the top 20% that year. And everything, I guess, took off. So yeah, I mean, it made no sense to change from anyone else coaching me. Mark obviously realised that he'd found some kind of ability or talent to be able to coach riders, and now he's actually coaching a couple of guys. So he's coached Edmund Bradbury for the last few years, and a couple of the Cambridge University guys, and another couple of local riders. So I think he's coaching 5 of us at the moment. So
that's great. It's worked out well for both of you.
Yeah.
Should we talk about your training then? So obviously Mark sets your training schedule.
Yep.
Do you have much to say in that, or do you basically do what he says?
I basically do what he says, to be fair. I mean, he obviously asks me how I'm feeling, or, we look
tell him if it's not working.
Yeah, we look at the data, but actually, I think a lot of the time, he might set me a session and I'll look in my training calendar and think, oh, Mark, I don't think I can do that. And he'll say, well, give it a go. And then I do it, and actually I find out that I can do it. So a lot of the time he knows better than me what I can do, because he looks at all of my data and he works out what power I should be able to do for, a 10-minute interval or a 20-minute interval, or maybe a shorter interval. And it might look a bit ambitious to me, but then actually I just about manage it. So he almost knows better than me a lot of the time. But then at the same time, if I am getting a bit tired, he'll obviously take feedback from me. So I could do a session and say, well, I hit this number and this number, but actually I felt like I might need a bit of a break now, or I've been really tired, I've not been sleeping that well, so maybe we should not have tomorrow morning's session, just to give me a bit of extra recovery, a bit of a lie-in, and then go again from the evening. So
what does a week look like, or what the training segment? What does it look like for you? Can you describe that?
It changes a lot over the course of the year, depending on what kind of block of training I'm in, and when I'm racing, what my race schedule is. Over the winter, I'll do a lot more kind of long base miles, long steady rides, and far fewer interval sessions. Whereas kind of coming into race season, I'll have fewer long rides. I'll probably still do long rides during...
What would a long ride be for you? How many hours or how many miles?
If I'm on a training camp, for example, and I'm doing predominant all long rides, then I'll have a massive volume week. So I might do a 40-hour kind of 10-day period on a training camp or something like that. And it'll be lots of kind of 5-hour rides, 6-hour rides. Right. But that's, a training camp thing. It's a relatively infrequent, it's not 1 week a month kind of thing. Normally long rides in the UK, 4 or 5 hours. I do a couple of 6-hour rides as well, but I don't do it every day. I might do 2 long rides a week. Traditionally, while I was still kind of technically in the lab Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, doing my PhD, then Saturdays and Sundays were reserved for long rides. Yeah. So I might do a 5-hour ride. So that's Saturday, the sort of base, 5-hour ride Sunday.
So that's the sort of base mileage. Yeah. And what other sort of things do you do? Intervals?
Yeah. So threshold intervals, pretty important for a time trialist. So I do threshold interval type sessions.
And what would they consist of?
So 2 by 20-minute intervals with a bit of a rest in the middle. I also do kind of sweet spot training, which Matt Bottrell's a big fan of. So yeah, he's probably spoken quite a lot about sweet spot training. So that's kind of good. So longer intervals, but at a lower intensity, which is quite good because it enables you to get a good volume of training in and quality training, but at an intensity that's not actually fatiguing you that much. So you can actually keep doing that kind of session without doing too much damage.
This will be outside these sessions, yeah?
It depends on the time of year and what I've been doing. So traditionally, the past couple of years, I've been restricted to basically only being able to ride on the road either at weekends or in the summer when it's light until 9 p.m, then I can go out on the road after being in the lab. But technically for the last 4 years, I've supposed to have been in the lab roughly 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, which meant that a lot of my training has been turbo based in the morning and the evening, and then out on the road at the weekends. Okay. This year, because I've been writing up my PhD, which I've been doing from home or from Spain or from wherever I've been racing, obviously I can do a lot more training on the road because I can train during daylight hours and work in the evenings, and that's fine. So I'm trying to move a lot of my training and a lot of my kind of intervals on the time trial bike or on the road bike onto the road, rather than doing them all on the turbo, because at the end of the day I have to be able to produce power on the road and not on the turbo. Yeah,
and I guess like most people, you find turbo not great fun? Or could you cope with it well?
I'm actually all right on the turbo. I mean, I can't do the kind of 4-hour stints on the turbo. I think the longest time I can probably make myself sit on a turbo is about 2.5 hours. Wow. But that's infrequent. I've read about Michael Hutchinson being able to sit on turbos for 4 hours, and I can't do that. No. But I don't mind doing, 2 hours of an hour of turboing in the morning, an hour of turboing in the evening. Because what I tend to do is put on some mindless TV program on my iPad or on my computer and do my intervals whilst watching something that doesn't require any brain power. So
I understand that.
I distract myself by watching slightly rubbish TV.
Guilty pleasures.
Yes, yeah, definitely guilty pleasures.
So now that you're preparing for an important season, how many hours a week do you think you're actually spending in training of the various types?
So this year probably most weeks are between 20 and 30 hours, but that's a big step up. So when I started kind of training properly 2012, I might only have been training on average 8 hours a week or something, and then stepped that up 2013, 2014, last year to probably on average between 10 and 15 hours a week, probably gradually increasing each year. But I was massively limited by the fact that I could do a 5-hour ride Saturday and a 5-hour ride Sunday, but then during the week I would only have morning and evening. And actually probably only a maximum of an hour in the morning, because there's a limit to how early I want to get up. If I wanted to be in the lab at 9,
Yeah.
I would have to get a bus from my house at 8:30 latest. So, really, I could get up at 6, do an hour on the turbo, but that's probably about it. And then again in the evening, you leave the lab at 5, get a bus home, get home, maybe only want to do a maximum of an hour and a half on the turbo. So I was limited in terms of during the week training time.
Now, you've obviously got Mark there helping you, but are you interested in the process of the science behind the training? Has your scientific background?
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, in recent years, there's been a massive increase in the use of power, and everyone has a power meter these days, and I think that's really useful, especially for time trialing, having a power meter and training with the power numbers. And Mark will obviously look at my data, but I kind of sit there with him and look at it as well. And it's good for me to understand the process. This year, and maybe the second half of last year as well, we've actually started kind of working with other people who have expertise in specific areas, to help improve my training and improve kind of our knowledge base, I suppose, on various areas. So working with Jamie Pringle to do some physiology testing, because actually for Mark to understand my kind of underlying physiology is really useful in kind of adapting sessions or coming up with new sessions to maybe help improve areas where I'm a bit weaker. And Jamie has a wealth of knowledge that, because he's worked with some brilliant people and in all sports, not just cycling. So he's suggested some changes to training. He's suggested a couple of sessions that we've kind of thrown into the mix as well to adapt my training. So my training's kind of been evolving over the years, but we've now started kind of building up almost kind of a bank of resources with additional people with their expertise to kind of help out as well. So there's Jamie in terms of the physiology. Started working now with Xavier Disley of Aero Coach to help with the aerodynamics side, because he's actually been a friend of mine and Mark's for several years, because he used to ride all the university events.
Yes,
because he was at Oxford and Plymouth and then Birmingham.
And he's got some interesting ideas in aerodynamics he's tried out over the years.
Yeah. But I mean, all of his research for his PhD has been kind of cycling related and aerodynamics related, and he's been interested in the area for years and years, and he's built up his own kind of wealth of knowledge.
Yes.
And so over the years we've spoken to him at various events about this, that and the other. Obviously he's now got Aero Coach, and I'm impressed with it. I've done a bit of work with him this week, and I know he's worked with lots of other British riders, British time trialists, and I think everyone's been really impressed. So
as well as Mark, then you're tapping into the best that's available in terms of thinking on
and
training.
And it's nice that we've known Zab for so long as well, and now to be able to kind of use his professional knowledge as well is really good. And then also started doing a bit of work this year with Alan Murchison on the nutrition side, and I know he has kind of been working a bit with Matt Bottrell. So I'm kind of building a bit of a support network around myself to kind of get the knowledge from people who have worked in various areas.
Can I ask you about riding with others? Do you do all your training on your own, or do you get any group work, or do you do train gangs or anything like that, the old-fashioned way?
I mostly train by myself, to be honest. I mean, there are clubs around Cambridge. When I started, I did a lot of riding with the university club, but it tends to work better, especially with the type of training that Mark sets me, to train by myself. Because if I am meant to be going out and doing a 4-hour ride at a set power, it's very difficult to achieve that whilst riding in a group.
Yes.
Because people don't necessarily want one person to sit on the front of the group the whole ride. But at the same time, if I then went to the back of the group, I'm suddenly riding far under the power I'm supposed to be riding.
Yes, yeah.
So in terms of kind of meeting my training goals, I suppose it's made sense for me to train by myself.
That's right, and people would be hanging on probably as well too.
I suppose, yeah, it depends who I ride with, but so and in again in past years when I've been fitting training around PhD, it's really useful in terms of my flexibility because I can just train when it suits me best, as opposed to having to go out at certain times because that's when a ride's leaving.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You mentioned nutrition earlier. That's another area I'd like to sort of investigate with you. Your work, you've mentioned Alan Murchison.
Yep.
So you obviously take an interest in that. Let's. How does that work with your diet? What sort of have you adapted your diet as you've moved through the your career?
Yeah, it's had to adapt. So when I first started, because I did a year of not doing any exercise, basically, I put on a lot of weight, and obviously power to weight. Big thing in cycling. Actually, not only power to weight ratio, but obviously the bigger you are, it's going to affect your aerodynamics as well. So also important in time trialing, even on a flat course, I suppose. So a big thing for me when I started cycling was getting off the excess weight that I'd put on. And actually, even when I was rowing, I was still bigger than I probably should have been. So trying to get down to a good race weight. So when I first started, I suppose my diet was quite restrictive, and I constantly kind of adapted it myself based on, was I losing weight, was I maintaining weight, was I putting on weight, and I tried to read books, read research on the internet, try and get bits of ideas of ways I could maybe lose weight whilst obviously still being able to train properly. But it's quite difficult, and obviously when you're also trying to do your PhD, train properly, research aerodynamics, research this, that and the other, kind of it adds an extra thing that maybe you don't always have time to look at. But having someone like Alan now, I kind of made contact with him right at the end of last year and have kind of been working with him for a couple of months now. He knows so much about food. He's been in the food industry for so long, and he's got so many great recipes that he's given me that really kind of hits all of the nutrition that I need as well, because I think that's one thing that I've been quite bad at over the last few years. I've found diets that maybe have enabled me to drop weight at the beginning of the season to get down to a race weight, but actually are probably not nutritionally doing that much for me.
Yes.
So I'm not kind of getting all of the nutrition that I've needed.
Do you use supplements at all?
I do, but I'm pretty careful about what supplements, because obviously now that I've racing at a national level, went to Worlds with GB, racing UCI's international races, obviously I get drugs tested, and you hear horror stories about people taking a supplement that hasn't been batch tested and it's been contaminated with something. So I'll only take supplements that are batch tested. So I'm really careful about making sure that everything I take has, the Informed Sport logo on, so that I'm 100% safe. So I'm pretty careful about that.
And what sort of, just to guide, what sort of things do you eat as a part of your normal diet then? What sort of things do you?
So lots of vegetables, quite a lot of fruit, though fruit's obviously very high in sugar. I know it's natural sugar, but I'm still quite careful about timings of when I might have fruit. So a big thing for me is eating the right thing at the right time. So if I'm having a rest day, I won't get up and have a massive bowl of porridge and then some with fruit and then a big lunch. So if I'm having a rest day, I tend to eat very low carb. So lots of fruit and vegetables, maybe eggs for breakfast because they're high protein. I don't need carbs to fuel the day. And if I am going to have something that's very high carb, I'll have it either like just before training or directly after. So making sure I refuel within 20 minutes of finishing a session. So I'll come back from a long ride and the first thing I do after I take off my shoes will be to go and have my food, and then I'll think about showering, like recovering, rather than kind of doing loads of other stuff and then thinking, oh, maybe I should eat now. Because
you have to be very organised then. I mean, it sounds with the training, all the other things you're doing, you must have to plan your day and your food and when you're going to eat, quite meticulously.
Yeah, and I think when I first started, I probably wasn't that good at it, and so I'd get in and I'd maybe check my phone and then go and have a shower, and then Mark would say, what are you doing? Have you had recovery shake yet? Oh no, not yet. I'd be like, well, why? Like, it's been 20 minutes since you finished. But over the last 4 years, Mark and I have kind of honed our routine, I suppose, right from what we do on a day-to-day basis to going to races, because obviously until this year, basically, Mark has done pretty much everything for me. He'll take me to the race, he'll set up my time trial bike while I'm, going and changing into my skin suit. He'll kind of take me off to the start and take my jersey, my warm jersey off me on the start line. He'll be there after the finish with my recovery drink. He'll take my time trial bike apart while I cool down on another bike. So
everyone should have one.
Yeah, everyone should have a Mark. Yeah, but we've honed our routine.
Yeah.
And especially for time trialling, we kind of know what we're doing from arriving there, maybe 2 hours before the event to, this is what happens at an hour and a half before, this is what happens at an hour before. And we've got that routine set. And, we don't have to discuss it anymore. We used to kind of write down timings on a piece of paper, and, we don't so much have to do that.
Like well-oiled machine.
Yeah.
Talking about machines, I wanted to ask you about the kit, and obviously, you're a professional now, and you're getting. Are you interested in the sort of the bike side of things? Is that something that you take a big interest in?
Yeah, and what cyclist doesn't like kind of going and finding an excuse to have new bikes. So again, for the past 3-4 years, Mark's kind of, or together, I suppose, we've made a lot of the decisions on the equipment that I've been riding, and we've, looked at new products that have come out, new research on the aerodynamics, and because in time trialing, aerodynamics is key. It's so important, and so as well as the training, that's been another thing that's been really important to make sure we've got right. And I've done various work on my aerodynamics over the last few years.
Position and kit.
Yeah, position and kit. I went in the wind tunnel for the first time 2 years ago, went in again last year to make various improvements, and obviously this year I've got a brand new setup, brand new bike, and so it's really important to me again to test the position on the other bike, because it's not just a case of changing the bike. With some bikes, there's quite a big interaction between the bike and the rider. So changing the bike, might require a different position. So worked with Sav Disley with my new setup to kind of make sure my position for this year is as good as it has been in the past, if not better. And actually, even though I'm quite small, my aerodynamics in the past have not been as good as they probably should have been, given the fact that I'm only 5'5". But working with Zav, we're already making improvements from the last few years. So hopefully I should go even faster this year on my new bike. New bike, new setup.
That's great. Yeah, when interviewed Matt Buttrill last year, and obviously he has a 20-year sort of record, you could see he has pictures on the wall of how his position has changed over that time.
Matt's position is incredible. I don't know how he gets into the position he does. We were talking about it the other day, actually, because I was setting up my my new Villiers time trial bike for the year, and Mark was saying something to me about tilting my pelvis. I was like, what do you mean? I don't understand. And so he pulled up this picture of Matt and said, look at Matt's pelvis, look how it's tilted. Well, I can't do that. And
Maybe
Mark,
it's a man-woman thing, I don't know, yeah.
No, 'cause Mark said actually, Matt's the one person, I don't think, Mark said that he hasn't seen anyone else who can do it quite as well as Matt can. But yeah, I don't know quite how he manages to get himself into such a good position, but it's incredible. I think he's a lot taller than me, and he probably has a much lower CDA than I do.
Yeah,
but,
maybe it's a bloke thing as well, I don't know.
I don't know. So, but yeah, I mean, one thing that's really, really nice actually this year, so on my Villiers time trial bike this year, I've got DI2, which, because for me, doing so much international racing with the UCIs, I've got to make sure that my position is UCI legal.
Yes, of course,
which, you know, people doing CTT events don't necessarily have to worry about. And for me, over the past few years, in order to be UCI legal, I've actually been maybe more hunched up than I might like to have been, because my extensions have to be within a certain length requirement, and having normal mechanical shifters on them adds length without it, you know, really giving me anything to hold on to, I suppose. Yeah. But this year I've got Shimano Di2, and so suddenly I can get more length because the pods take up a lot less space than a mechanical shifter. So that's quite nice.